Dreams take flight. For 30 a.m. blinked from the bedside clock's face, an unbidden wake-up call. No alarm was necessary. A familiar brew of eager anticipation and sober responsibility had been his companion since yesterday. He swung out of bed, relishing the cool floor against his skin. Pre-dawn shadows clung to the corners of his small apartment, illuminated only by the faint glow of a street lamp. Barefoot, he moved to the kitchenette, the linoleum a shock against his soles. He started the coffee, the promise of its awakening scent soon permeating the air. While it dripped, he retrieved the flight plan from meticulous stack. San Francisco to Denver. A standard route, yet each journey held potential, a chance to hone his skills, a skyward ballet. He scanned the manifest, fuel calculations, emergency landing options. The weather report followed. San Francisco's signature fog was expected to dissipate by late morning, but over the Rockies, Denver predicted possible turbulence. Manageable, but deserving of respect. He marked the trouble spots with yellow, a silent vow to vigilance. Coffee in hand, his thoughts drifted back. He saw himself as a boy at the Tuskegee airfield, eyes glued to the planes. His grandfather, a mechanic with a legendary airman, shared tales of bravery, skill, barriers shattered, expectations defied. These stories, planted as seeds, had grown into a consuming fire. It hadn't been a smooth ascent. The quiet doubts, the sidelong glances, the relentless need to outshine. He recalled one instructor, a weathered old hand, who'd made his skepticism clear. "Some birds ain't built for flight," he'd scoffed. Those words became jet fuel, driving him to study harder, practice relentlessly, until his skill was undeniable. He won his wings, honestly earned, but the sting of prejudice lingered, a constant reminder of the hurdles ahead. He banished the memory, anchoring himself in the present. No use dwelling on the past. Today was a fresh start, a new flight, a chance to prove himself anew. He drained his coffee, feeling its jolt of focus. A quick, hot shower banished the last vestiges of sleep. He donned his Navy uniform, the 4 bars on his shoulders emblems of his position and duty. He met his reflection, straightening his tie, poised, self-assured, competent. The image he needed to project, the image he was. He grabbed his flight bag, double-checking the essentials: headset, sunglasses, manual. Leaving the apartment, his gaze lingered on the framed photo on his desk. His grandfather, standing tall before AP-51 Mustang, a confident grin etched on his face. Caleb offered a silent smile, a commitment to carry on the legacy. The airport already throbbed with pre-dawn activity. Ground crews prepped the aircraft, baggage handlers loaded cargo, and a trickle of passengers passed through security. Caleb moved with purpose through the terminal, his uniform eliciting subtle nods of respect. He reached the gate where Maria Rodriguez, his first officer, waited. "Morning, Captain," she greeted, smiling. "Ready for the skies?" "Always," Caleb responded, returning the warmth. Maria was an astute, dedicated pilot, deserving of his full trust. A solid team. Together, they walked toward their aircraft, a Boeing 737-800, glistening under the nascent light. Caleb executed a meticulous pre-flight check, inspecting engines, wings, control surfaces. He ran his hand along the fuselage's cool skin, feeling a bond with the machine that would carry him aloft. It was more than a job, more than mere transportation. A partnership, a human-machine collaboration, a gravity-defying dance. Inside the cockpit, he and Maria ran through the checklist, methodically confirming each system. Fuel, navigation, communication, perfection was the only acceptable standard. He adjusted his seat, becoming one with the controls. The cockpit was his realm, his sanctuary, where he felt truly alive. As the first sun rays gilded the sky, passengers began to board. From the cockpit, Caleb observed their faces, a blend of eagerness and trepidation. He knew they placed their faith in him, a responsibility he bore with gravity. He would deliver them to Denver safely, smoothly, on schedule. He exchanged a knowing glance with Maria. "Showtime." San Francisco Tower, United 737 requesting takeoff clearance. Maria's voice, calm and professional, crackled over the radio. Clearance granted. Caleb pushed forward the throttles, feeling the engines awaken with a resounding roar. The aircraft surged forward, gradually gaining speed as it hurtled down the runway. He gripped the controls, senses sharpened, focus absolute. As the plane broke free from the earth, a wave of exhilaration washed over him. He was home, riding the sky, pursuing his aspirations. San Francisco receded below, a sprawling panorama of structures and spans. He gently banked the plane, angling eastward toward the rising sun. Dreams unfurl, he thought, and for that instant, all misgivings and hardships dissolved. Only the sky, the aircraft, and the unwavering zeal that had brought him here remained. An unexpected change. Caleb navigated toward Gate 28, the airport's low thrum, a well-known and welcome constant. His rolling suitcase, a faithful veteran of countless trips, trailed in his wake. He adjusted his cap, the gold braid flashing briefly, and inhaled deeply. The terminal air, a peculiar cocktail of kerosene, roasted beans, and eager expectation, was a scent he'd grown fond of. It smelled like purpose realized. At the counter, a weary-faced Mr. Abernathy, name tag gleaming faintly, was already occupied with a flustered traveler battling an unwieldy carry-on. Caleb waited, observing the carefully managed mayhem. A toddler's piercing cry cut through the din. A businessman's voice boomed into his mobile, and announcements echoed, each a siren song of faraway places. Finally, Mr. Abernathy looked up, a smile touching his lips as his gaze met Caleb's. "Good morning, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" Caleb offered the pass. The stiff paper felt solid in his grip. "Good morning." Mr. Abernathy scanned the barcode, his fingers dancing across the keys. A shadow flickered across his face. "Captain Jones, I'm so sorry, but there appears to be a slight adjustment to your seating." He averted his eyes, concentrating intently on the screen. Caleb frowned slightly. "Adjustment? Yes, sir. Your seat assignment has been altered." Mr. Abernathy's tone was unnaturally bright, a common camouflage for unpleasant tidings. "Change to what?" Caleb inquired, a knot tightening in his stomach. He'd specifically requested a forward seat to expedite his departure upon landing. A VIP client awaited him in Denver, and every second mattered. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, the sound amplifying in the sudden quiet of Caleb's focus. "Economy, sir." The word landed heavily, a discordant note. A wave of incredulity washed over Caleb, quickly followed by the familiar, unwelcome burn creeping up his neck. "Economy? There must be some mistake. I was ticketed for first class." He kept his voice even controlled. He would not afford anyone the satisfaction of witnessing his frustration. Mr. Abernathy shuffled papers nervously. "I understand your frustration, Captain, but the system reflects the change." Apparently, a last-minute aircraft substitution occurred, necessitating some passenger reassignments. The explanation tasted stale, pre-scripted. Caleb was well aware of the practice of bumping passengers to accommodate staff traveling standby, yet the implication grated. Was this truly a random act? Or was something else lurking beneath the surface? He suppressed the urge to leap to conclusions, but the question lingered in nagging doubt. He drew a steadying breath. "And are there absolutely no other seats available in first class?" Mr. Abernathy pecked at the keyboard. "I'm terribly sorry, Captain. The flight is completely booked. Economy is the sole remaining option." He offered a weak, placating smile. Perhaps a complimentary beverage voucher would be acceptable? Caleb fixed the gate agent with a gaze that held a mixture of emotions. Disappointment, of course. Irritation, undeniably. But underlying it all, a quiet determination began to coalesce. He wouldn't allow this to sidetrack him. He wouldn't permit this petty indignity to affect his performance. He had responsibilities, passengers relying on him, a reputation to protect. "No, thank you," he replied, his voice measured and firm. "The voucher isn't necessary." He paused, meeting Mr. Abernathy's gaze head-on. "I'll take my seat in economy." He accepted the reissued boarding pass, the flimsy slip feeling like a deliberate affront. Turning from the counter, he caught the eye of a woman nearby. She offered a sympathetic smile, a silent acknowledgement of his predicament. Caleb gave a curt nod, a wordless thank you for her quiet understanding. As he walked toward the gate entrance, he sensed the attention of other passengers. Some looked on with curiosity, others with indifference. He straightened his back, holding his head high. He was Captain Caleb Jones, and he refused to be diminished. Not today. He located his seat toward the rear of the aircraft, uncomfortably near the engines. The cramped quarters were a world away from the spacious luxury of first class. He stowed his bag, buckled his seatbelt, and closed his eyes, centering himself with a familiar pre-flight ritual. He mentally reviewed weather patterns, the planned route, emergency protocols. He banished the lingering resentment and refocused on the task before him. He was a pilot, and his primary concern was the safety of everyone on board. Everything else was just static. Walking through the aisle, the boarding music, a saccharine melody of synthesized strings, grated on Caleb's nerves as he stepped onto the plane. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his pilot's cap, and offered a polite nod to the flight attendant at the door. Her smile seemed a little strained, a little too practiced. He couldn't blame her. Dealing with disgruntled passengers was part of the job description. He moved forward into the hallowed halls of first class. The plush, oversized seats, bathed in the warm glow of individual reading lights, seemed to mock him. The scent of expensive leather and overpriced perfume hung heavy in the air. He kept his gaze fixed ahead, focusing on the invisible line that would lead him through the gauntlet of judgmental eyes. It started subtly. A quick glance, a raised eyebrow, a barely perceptible headshake. Then the whispers began, carried on the hushed tones of privilege. He imagined he could hear snippets. Captain Economy, unheard of. He felt his face grow warm. He knew he shouldn't care, knew he was a professional, knew he was more than capable of flying this plane. But the weight of their stares, the unspoken assumptions, pressed down on him. He was suddenly acutely aware of the color of his skin, of the crispness of his uniform, of the incongruity of his presence in this space. A woman with a cascade of platinum blonde hair and enough jewelry to sink a small boat openly gawked at him. Her companion, a man with a ruddy complexion and a tailored suit, leaned in and murmured something in her ear. They both chuckled, a sound that felt like a slap in the face. Caleb clenched his jaw. He forced himself to maintain his pace, his expression neutral. He refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. He was Captain Caleb Jones, damn it, and he wouldn't be intimidated. He passed a young couple, engrossed in their phones, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. For a moment, he felt a flicker of envy. How nice it must be to simply exist, unburdened by the weight of other people's prejudices. As he neared the invisible barrier between first class and economy, the whispers intensified. He could feel the collective gaze of the first-class passengers boring into his back. It was as if he were an intruder, a trespasser in their exclusive domain. He took a deep breath and stepped through the curtain, the change in atmosphere immediate. The air in economy was thick with the scent of recycled air and stale peanuts. The seats were smaller, the lighting harsher, the overall vibe less polished. He scanned the row numbers, finally locating his assigned seat. 28B, a middle seat, naturally. He squeezed past a woman with a sleeping child and a man engrossed in a video game, muttering apologies that were barely acknowledged. He settled into the cramped space, his knees pressing against the seat in front of him. He tried to ignore the lingering stares from first class, the whispers that still seemed to echo in his ears. He focused on the task ahead, preparing for the flight, reviewing the weather reports, mentally running through the pre-flight checklist. He reached into his bag and pulled out his tablet, hoping to create a buffer between himself and the surrounding negativity. He opened the flight plan, his fingers tracing the route across the screen. He knew every inch of that airspace, every potential hazard, every possible contingency. He was a pilot, first and foremost, and he would not let the petty prejudices of others distract him from his duty. He would fly this plane safely and efficiently, no matter what indignities he had to endure. But a cold knot of anger remained in his stomach, a silent testament to the injustice he had just experienced. It was a feeling he knew all too well, a feeling he had been fighting against his entire life. And today, it felt heavier than ever. A mother's worry. Caleb shoved his threadbare carry-on beneath the seat, the bag's rough texture a world away from the plush leather surrounding him in first class. He settled into his window seat, the cool vinyl a momentary relief. Across the aisle and a row up, a young woman bounced a fussing infant, her face a mask of exhaustion. The tiny girl, a bundle in lemon yellow, pierced the cabin's quiet with a wail that resonated deep within Caleb. Brenda Miller, according to the glimpse he caught of her boarding pass, murmured soothing nothings, her brow slick with perspiration, wisps of dark hair escaping her ponytail to frame her face. Their eyes met briefly. An apologetic flicker crossed her features before she returned to her daughter. He watched her test formula on her wrist, then proffer the bottle, which Lily rejected with a thrashing arm and a renewed burst of sound. Brenda's shoulders slumped. Desperation was etched into her posture. She patted the baby's back, rocking harder with each failure. The cabin pressure seemed to amplify the cries into a piercing shriek, jarring to Caleb, even as empathy tugged at him. He recalled the endless nights with his niece, Maya, the bone-deep weariness, the futile attempts to comfort. How much harder, he thought, to face this ordeal alone, exposed to the judgment of fellow passengers. The man beside Brenda shifted, rattling his newspaper with pointed emphasis. Brenda visibly recoiled, her cheeks flaming. Caleb recognized the humiliation, the feeling of falling short of some silent expectation. A wave of protective anger surged within him. From her diaper bag, Brenda retrieved a pacifier, offering it to Lily, who promptly launched it into the aisle. Caleb intercepted it before it could roll too far, returning it with a small, encouraging smile. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice tight. She wiped the pacifier on her jeans and tried again, but Lily remained inconsolable. He saw panic bloom in Brenda's eyes. Trapped, exposed, utterly spent. Caleb knew that feeling intimately, that sense of vulnerability, flaws laid bare under a harsh spotlight. He longed to offer help, yet hesitated to intrude. Shifting in his seat, a nervous energy coiled within him. A pilot, trained to maintain composure amid chaos. Surely he could offer some solace, however small. The pre-flight safety demonstration played out, the flight attendant's motions lost on Caleb. His focus was fixed on Brenda, her baby's incessant cries, and the growing disquiet settling in his gut. The plane was poised for takeoff, but something warned him this flight would be anything but turbulence-free. Crisis in the cockpit. The seatbelt light pinged on, its insistent chime cutting through the drone of the engines. Before Caleb could react, the jet bucked like a bronco, slamming him against the window. Scalding coffee geysered from his cup, staining the pristine cotton of his shirt. A wave of startled cries swept through first class. He clenched the armrests, his knuckles bone white. This wasn't mere turbulence. This was an abrupt, savage assault. Up front, Brenda wrestled with a sobbing Lily, the child's fear palpable. Then, Captain Reynolds' voice, tight with strain, crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We're experiencing a minor operational issue. Please remain calm. Keep your seatbelts fastened. Further information will follow." Minor operational issue? Caleb recognized that paternal tone, the one his father used to mask escalating domestic disasters. Another, even more violent lurch. Overhead bins burst open, disgorging a rain of magazines and blankets. A piercing scream echoed. Caleb undid his seatbelt. He couldn't remain tethered. He needed to assess the situation. As he rose, Reynolds' voice returned, now edged with undisguised urgency. "Attention passengers, this is Captain Reynolds. I regret to inform you that our co-pilot, Mr. Davies, has taken ill and is incapacitated. We are currently evaluating our options." Incapacitated? A cold dread seeped into Caleb's bones. It could signify anything from a debilitating headache to a cardiac event. Regardless, it boded ill. The announcement unleashed pandemonium. Passengers shrieked, wept, and clawed at the overhead compartments, deaf to the flight attendants' frantic pleas. Lily's terrified shrieks mingled with the rising tide of shouts. Brenda, her face a mask of terror and streaked with tears, gazed desperately toward the cockpit. Caleb battled his way upstream against the panicked mob. He had to reach the front. He had to assist. Near the galley, a flight attendant struggled to maintain control. "Please, everyone, return to your seats. The aisles must be kept clear." Her words vanished in the din, reaching the cockpit door. He hammered on it. "Reynolds, Caleb Johnson, open up." The portal flew open, revealing Captain Reynolds, his face ashen and glistening with perspiration. His usually impeccable uniform was disheveled, his tie loosened. Inside, the cramped space pulsed with desperate activity. The co-pilot, Davies, slumped motionless, his complexion pallid. An oxygen mask obscured his features, but he remained unresponsive. "Caleb, thank heavens," Reynolds rasped, his voice ragged. "Davies just collapsed. I've no idea what happened. I need you in here. Now." He offered no further explanation. Caleb knew instinctively what was required. He squeezed past Reynolds into the co-pilot's chair, rapidly taking stock. Instruments blinked frantic warnings. The altimeter needle danced wildly. The aircraft shuddered with each buffeting gust. "What's the heading?" Caleb demanded, his tone even despite the adrenaline surging through him. 090, Reynolds replied, his hands locked onto the controls. "But I can barely maintain altitude." The autopilot disengaged when Davies went under. Caleb spared another glance at Davies, his face still hidden. There was no time for concern. Lives depended on him. "I've got it, Captain," Caleb declared, his hands finding the controls. He adjusted the rudder, feeling the aircraft respond to his touch. The violent shaking lessened perceptibly. "Can you handle this?" Reynolds asked, his voice raw with desperation. Caleb met his gaze, his own unwavering. "I was made to handle this, Captain." He inhaled deeply, shutting out the bedlam in the cabin, the cacophony of alarms, the crushing weight of responsibility. Only one thing mattered: guiding this plane and all those aboard safely back to Earth. Stepping up, the captain's clipped announcement sliced through the cabin speakers. "Medical emergency in the cockpit. Seeking a physician or anyone with piloting expertise, please report to the flight deck at once." A cold knot formed in Caleb's stomach. Piloting expertise? That was unequivocally him. The ingrained programming of years behind the yoke kicked in. Past humiliations, the passengers' casual bigotry, vanished, insignificant against the surge of duty, to pilot, to guide, to safeguard. The click of his unbuckling seatbelt punctuated the sudden hush blanketing the economy section. As he straightened, his height offered a stark vista down the aisle. Anxious faces tilted upwards, whispers rippling through the air, fear taking root in their expressions. He had to reach the cockpit now. Spotting a flight attendant near the galley, a young woman named Sarah, her face already etched with worry, her hands fluttering as she soothed a passenger. Caleb approached, his voice a deliberate counterpoint to the inner turmoil. "Excuse me, I'm Captain Caleb Jones, off-duty Horizon pilot. I heard the call. Need access to the flight deck." Sarah's eyes widened, a complex blend of hope, disbelief, and suspicion flickering within them. "A pilot? Are you certain?" Caleb met her gaze, projecting the unwavering assurance born of countless hours in the air. "Absolutely. Though not on duty, I am fully qualified and able to assist. Every second counts. Please inform the captain I'm here." He produced his Horizon employee ID, extending it for her inspection. The picture, the name, the corporate insignia, unimpeachable evidence. Sarah snatched the card, her fingers momentarily faltering as she examined it. Doubts seemed to ebb, replaced by an almost desperate reliance. Okay, just stay here, please. I'll notify him. She spun around, hurrying toward the cockpit door, her footsteps a rapid tattoo against the cabin's quiet backdrop. Caleb remained, a figure of contained readiness, watching her retreat. He could almost feel the collective anxiety of the passengers weighing upon him, a silent chorus pleading for safe passage. He raked a hand through his hair, a subtle giveaway of the pressure he fought to conceal. He knew his abilities. He'd weathered far worse conditions, navigated storms that would have broken lesser souls. But this held a different weight. This was about redemption, about proving himself, not just to the company, but to all who had questioned him. To himself. He observed Sarah speaking urgently through the closed door. The words were lost, but the frantic gestures spoke volumes. Then, the door swung inward, revealing not the captain, but a male flight attendant, his expression grim, a headset clamped to his head. He gestured Caleb forward. "Captain Reynolds needs you immediately," he said, his tone brittle with suppressed panic. "This way." Caleb moved with practiced swiftness, the flight attendant leading him through the cramped passage. Approaching the cockpit, he could discern the ragged sounds of labored respiration. The atmosphere thrummed with raw urgency. He entered the cockpit, the limited space feeling even more compressed. Captain Reynolds was slumped in his command chair, his face ashen and filmed with perspiration. The co-pilot was unresponsive, his head resting limply against the window. The instrument panel pulsed with a frantic ballet of lights, a cascade of data that momentarily threatened to overwhelm. Reynolds looked up, his eyes bloodshot and swimming with pain and a measure of hope. "Thank God you're here, Jones," he wheezed, his voice a ragged whisper. I don't know how much longer I can." His words trailed off, his breathing increasingly labored. Caleb absorbed the scene in a heartbeat. Altitude, airspeed, heading, all registered instantly. He assessed the captain's condition, the co-pilot's incapacitation. He knew his role. "Easy, Captain," Caleb said, his voice a calm anchor in the storm. "I've got it from here. Just tell me what you need." He moved toward the co-pilot station, prepared to assume control. The burden of responsibility settled onto his shoulders, heavy yet familiar. He was home. He was flying once more. Taking control, the cockpit pressed in on him, a claustrophobic haven humming with anxious energy. Captain Miller, slumped over, offered a feeble acknowledgement. "Jones, thank heavens. You're up." His voice, a dry scrape, barely carried. Caleb wasted no time. He squeezed past the first officer, whose face was the color of chalk, and slid into the co-pilot's seat. The jet lurched savagely, the harness biting into his shoulders. A maelstrom raged outside, a bruised and angry sky swirling with furious energy. Rain hammered the windscreen, distorting the world into a kaleidoscope of fractured light. "What's the story?" Caleb demanded, his hands already dancing across the controls, feeling the aircraft shudder beneath his touch. "Food poisoning, I think," Miller wheezed, clutching his midsection. "Hit us both like a ton of bricks. Tried to couldn't manage." A sheen of sweat glazed his brow. Caleb inhaled deeply, forcing his focus. The instruments blurred momentarily, then resolved into sharp definition. Altitude, 33,000 feet. Airspeed, erratic. Turbulence, extreme. He processed the data rapidly, his mind a vice clamping down on the creeping tendrils of panic. "First officer, attend to the captain," Caleb directed, his tone a calm anchor in the storm. "Ensure he's stable and administer oxygen if possible." Galvanized, the first officer scrambled to assist. Caleb wrestled with the yoke, battling the crosswinds that hammered the fuselage. He adjusted the flaps, easing the stress on the wings. "We need to drop below this mess," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. A glance at the radar revealed a sprawling tempest, a dizzying vortex of danger. He activated the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Jones. We're experiencing some unforeseen turbulence, and Captain Miller is indisposed. I've assumed control and will be making a slight course correction to avoid the worst of the storm. Please remain seated with your seatbelts securely fastened. We'll keep you informed." His voice, amplified through the cabin, resonated with a deep, reassuring timbre. He pictured the passengers, their faces tight with apprehension, and laced his words with a conviction he struggled to maintain. Calm was paramount, even as his pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Heading 270, Caleb informed the first officer, whose complexion had regained a touch of color, requesting permission to descend to 28,000 feet. The radio crackled in response. "Air traffic control acknowledges. Clear to descend to 28,000 feet. Caution. Severe turbulence reported in your immediate vicinity." "Acknowledged," Caleb replied, his grip tightening on the controls until his knuckles shone bone-white. The plane bucked again, throwing them violently against their restraints. Outside, strobing lightning illuminated the turbulent cloudscape in flashes of stark, fleeting brilliance. Miller groaned beside him. "You've got this, Jones," he whispered, his voice thin but resolute. "Always were a damn fine pilot." Caleb offered a grateful glance. "Thanks, Captain." He eased the aircraft into a controlled descent, fighting the swell of fear. The turbulence amplified, shaking the plane like a child's toy. He could hear muffled cries from the passenger cabin, filtered through the closed door. He zeroed in on the instruments, his mind a laser beam cutting through the haze of anxiety. Airspeed, altitude, heading. He made subtle corrections, coaxing the plane through the chaotic air. His father's words echoed in his mind. A good pilot doesn't fight the plane, he becomes one with it. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling for that connection. He sensed the subtle shifts in the air currents, the push and pull of the wind. He anticipated the turbulence, bracing for each impact. Gradually, painstakingly, he started to regain command. After what felt like an eternity trapped in a washing machine, the buffeting began to ease. The downpour lessened, and the clouds began to dissipate, revealing glimpses of azure sky. Caleb exhaled slowly, his muscles screaming in protest. He glanced at Captain Miller, still pale but showing signs of recovery. "We're clear of the worst," Caleb announced, his voice raspy. "Just some light chop ahead." He keyed the microphone once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Jones. We've successfully navigated the storm and are now entering calmer air. We appreciate your patience. We'll be returning to our original flight path shortly." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the cabin, audible even above the engine's drone. Caleb permitted himself a small, weary smile. He had seized control, not just of the aircraft, but of the fear that threatened to consume him. The journey was far from over, but in that moment, he had proved something to himself, and perhaps, to those watching, he became the pilot they needed him to be. Safe landing. The wheels made contact, a soft thud that vibrated through the fuselage, a physical exhale shared by everyone on board. Caleb's grip remained firm on the controls as the aircraft slowed, the engine's powerful song softening to a contented drone. He guided the jet towards its assigned slot, his concentration unwavering even as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a tranquil satisfaction. He risked a glance at the captain, still slumped, his complexion ashen. Medical personnel were en route, thanks to Caleb's call during their descent. He desperately wished for the captain's recovery. He'd earned it. As the plane rolled to a stop, a hush fell over the cabin, punctuated only by hushed whispers. Caleb drew a steadying breath, his pulse finally normalizing. He addressed the passengers over the PA, his voice even and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Greater Rochester International Airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the jetway is connected and the sign is extinguished. Our captain is receiving medical attention. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." Cutting the connection, he noticed Brenda struggling with a wailing Lily. The little girl's face was a mask of distress, her cries piercing the quiet. Exhaustion etched deep lines around Brenda's eyes, reflecting a mix of lingering fear and desperation. Caleb unbuckled his harness and carefully made his way back to their row. "Everything all right? Is there anything I can do?" Brenda looked up, relief momentarily softening her features. "She's just overstimulated, I think." The turbulence terrified her, and she hasn't calmed down since. She shifted Lily, attempting to comfort her. "I just need to get her off this plane." "I understand," Caleb replied gently. "Here, perhaps this will help." He retrieved a small, brightly colored toy airplane he kept tucked away for just such moments. Offering it to Lily, he said, "Hello there, little one. What do we have here?" Lily's cries hitched, her gaze locking onto the toy. A tiny hand reached out, grasping the plush plane with surprising strength. Gurgles and coos replaced the screams. A grateful smile bloomed on Brenda's face. "Oh, thank you from the bottom of my heart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means. After everything, it's such a blessing. I truly don't know how we would have managed without you. You were so calm and reassuring. You saved us." A faint blush warmed Caleb's cheeks, slightly embarrassed by the heartfelt gratitude. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said modestly. "I'm just glad I could help." The connecting gate clicked into place, and the flight attendants started preparations for deplaning. A low murmur rippled through the cabin as passengers gathered belongings. Caleb noticed several pairs of eyes fixed on him, filled with admiration and thankfulness. As the first passengers began to file out, a spontaneous wave of applause erupted. Starting tentatively, it swelled into a resounding ovation. Caleb was stunned, warmth rising in his face. He saw smiles, grateful nods, and tears of relief reflected back at him. He watched as Brenda, clutching Lily in a small bag, approached. "Thank you again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're a true hero." She squeezed his hand before moving down the aisle. The applause continued as more passengers disembarked, many pausing to offer words of appreciation. "You did a magnificent job, young man," an elderly gentleman said, patting him on the arm. "You brought us home safely." Caleb remained seated, his chest swelling with pride. He had confronted his anxieties, overcome the crisis, and guided everyone home unscathed. He had proven to himself and to the rest what he was capable of achieving. As the last of the passengers left the aircraft, Caleb inhaled deeply, allowing himself a small, private smile. The captain was being carefully moved onto a gurney by paramedics. Their eyes met, and the captain offered a weak but genuine nod of approval. Caleb sensed that this was only the beginning of his journey. A hero's welcome. The captain's voice, crackling slightly through the intercom, cut through the murmuring relief that filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. As you know, we experienced a medical situation mid-flight. I am now recovering, thanks to the exceptional skill and quick thinking of Mr. Caleb Jones." A pause, and then a note of genuine admiration. Mr. Jones, who was traveling as a passenger, stepped up to the plate and landed this aircraft flawlessly. His actions averted what could have been a very serious situation. He has my deepest gratitude, and I'm sure yours as well. A spontaneous round of applause erupted, louder this time, warmer. Caleb, still seated in the cockpit, felt a blush creep up his neck. He wasn't used to praise, especially not of this magnitude. He'd just done what needed to be done. The captain continued, his voice stronger now. "I'll be resting for the next few hours. Mr. Jones has kindly agreed to assist the relief pilot in getting us safely to our final destination. Please give them both your full cooperation." The flight to Chicago was uneventful, almost anticlimactic. Caleb answered the relief pilot's questions concisely, pointing out potential wind shears and optimal descent paths. He felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet confidence he hadn't known he possessed. Disembarking in Chicago was different. A small crowd had gathered near the gate, drawn by the whispers that had spread like wildfire through the airport. As Caleb stepped off the plane, a wave of applause washed over him. People craned their necks, cameras flashed. He saw Mrs. Davison, beaming, waving a hand-drawn sign that read, "Thank you, Caleb." He was quickly ushered away from the throng by airport security, but not before he caught the eye of a familiar figure standing near the terminal exit, Mr. Abernathy. Abernathy looked smaller, somehow. His usual bluster was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost sheepish expression. He approached Caleb slowly, extending a hand. "Mr. Jones," he said, his voice subdued, "I owe you an apology. A sincere one. I misjudged you. Terribly." Caleb stared at the offered hand, then met Abernathy's gaze. He saw genuine remorse there. After a moment, he shook the older man's hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. I appreciate that. I heard what you did," Abernathy continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Saving that plane, saving all those lives, it was remarkable. I was wrong to doubt you." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "I'm glad you were on that flight." The incident didn't end there. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting Caleb's unexpected heroism. He was interviewed by local news channels, his face splashed across newspapers. He became a local hero, the reluctant pilot, as one headline declared. The story resonated, not just because of the drama of the mid-air emergency, but because it was a story of overcoming prejudice and proving oneself against the odds. Caleb found himself speaking at local schools, inspiring young people, especially young black children, to pursue their dreams, no matter the obstacles. He spoke of hard work, perseverance, and the importance of believing in yourself, even when others don't. One evening, after a particularly moving speech at his old high school, a young girl, no older than 10, approached him. Her eyes were wide with admiration. "Mr. Jones," she said, clutching a worn-out model airplane, "I want to be a pilot too. Can you teach me?" Caleb smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Absolutely," he said. "Absolutely I can." He continued to fly, his confidence bolstered by the overwhelming support he received. He no longer felt the weight of expectation as a burden, but as a challenge to be met. He was still Captain Caleb Jones, the same dedicated, meticulous pilot he had always been. But now, he was also something more, an inspiration, a symbol of hope, proof that talent and skill could transcend prejudice and soar to new heights. The sky, he realized, was truly the limit, and he was finally ready to embrace it. He never forgot Captain Reynolds. He visited him in the hospital and kept in touch as he recovered. Reynolds became a mentor and a friend, offering guidance and support as Caleb navigated his newfound fame. Abernathy, too, remained a changed man. He became an advocate for diversity within the airline, actively seeking out and promoting talented individuals from underrepresented backgrounds. Caleb's actions had not only saved a plane, they had sparked a ripple effect, creating a wave of positive change that touched the lives of many. He had proven that one person, armed with courage, skill, and an unwavering belief in themselves, could make a world of difference.